My daughter said, "My husband and I have decided to sell your house to pay for our vacation. You're going to a nursing home. Pack your things and hand over the keys." I said nothing. She didn't know that the house was all ready. Good day, dear listeners. It's Louisa again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I had lived in my house on Maple Street for 43 years. My husband Robert and I bought it when Sarah was just 2 years old, back in 1982. The mortgage was paid off 15 years ago, and every corner of this place held memories. Robert's workshop in the garage, Sarah's height marks on the kitchen door frame, the garden where I grew tomatoes every summer. After Robert passed 3 years ago, this house became even more precious. It wasn't just walls and a roof, it was all I had left of the life we built together. For the past few months, I noticed Sarah calling more frequently. At first, I was pleased. My daughter had always been busy with her career in real estate and her husband Mark's marketing job. They lived about 30 miles away in a newer development, one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where every house looked the same. But lately, her questions had taken an odd turn. "Mom, have you thought about downsizing?" she asked during one call. "This house is too big for you. All those stairs. The maintenance." I laughed it off. "I'm 72, not 92, honey. I can still climb stairs just fine." Another time, she brought up retirement communities. "Mark and I drove past this beautiful senior living facility. You should see it, Mom. They have activities, a dining room, housekeeping." "Wouldn't that be nice?" "I have activities," I told her firmly. "My book club, my garden, my neighbors. I don't need strangers doing my housekeeping." But she persisted. Mark started joining these conversations, always with that slick salesman smile of his. "Just think about it, Margaret. You're sitting on a valuable asset. This property has appreciated significantly. You could sell, invest the money, live comfortably." "I am living comfortably," I said, my patience wearing thin. Then came the visits. Sarah and Mark showed up unannounced one Saturday morning. They walked through my house with notepads, measuring tape, taking photos. When I asked what they were doing, Sarah said they were just helping me assess the property value. "For your own benefit, Mom, you should know what you have." Something cold settled in my stomach that day. The way Mark examined my kitchen cabinets, knocked on walls, peered into closets, it felt invasive, predatory. But I said nothing. She was my daughter. Surely I was being paranoid. 2 weeks later, Sarah called again. "Mom, we need to talk. Can Mark and I come over tomorrow?" The tone in her voice made my hands shake. I agreed. They arrived at 10 in the morning. Sarah didn't hug me at the door like she usually did. They sat across from me in my living room, on the couch Robert and I had picked out together 20 years ago. Mark had a folder in his hands. Sarah's face was set in an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, determined, almost cruel. "Mom," she began, her voice clipped and businesslike. "Mark and I have been talking. We've made a decision about your situation." "My situation?" I repeated slowly. "You can't keep living here alone. It's not practical. You're getting older, and this house is too much responsibility." She glanced at Mark, who nodded encouragingly. "So we've decided to sell the house. We already contacted a real estate agent. The market is excellent right now." My mouth went dry. "Sell my house? Sarah, this is my home. You can't just—" "The money will cover a very nice assisted living facility," Mark interrupted smoothly. "We've already toured several options. There's one with an opening next month. You'll love it." "And," Sarah added, leaning forward with that terrible coldness in her eyes, "we also need some of the proceeds. Mark and I have been planning a trip, a really important one for his business networking. Europe, 6 weeks. It's an investment in our future. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. Was this really my daughter? The little girl I raised? Who I comforted through nightmares? Who I put through college? So here's what's going to happen, Mom. Sarah's voice was flat, final. We're selling your house to pay for our trip and your care facility. You're going to the senior home. Start packing your things and give us the keys. We have movers scheduled for 2 weeks from now. I sat there in stunned silence. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst through my chest. But I didn't say a word. I just looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt something shift inside me. Because Sarah didn't know something crucial. She didn't know that the house was no longer in my name, and she was about to find out just how badly she had miscalculated. After Sarah and Mark left that day, I sat motionless in my living room for what felt like hours. The afternoon light shifted across the floor, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow the furniture whole. My hands trembled in my lap. How had it come to this? How had the baby I nursed, the child I protected, the young woman I supported through every heartbreak and triumph, how had she turned into someone who could look me in the eye and tell me I was being evicted from my own life? I thought about Robert. What would he say if he were here? He never trusted Mark, not from the beginning. There's something off about that guy, he'd told me privately before their wedding. Too smooth, too eager to know about our finances. I'd dismissed his concerns then. Now, his words echoed in my mind like a warning I should have heeded. That night, I barely slept. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Robert for 40 years, staring at the ceiling, calculating everything I stood to lose. This house wasn't just property. It was my independence, my security, my memories. Without it, I would be completely at Sarah and Mark's mercy. And if today had taught me anything, it was that they had no mercy left for me. By dawn, fear had transformed into something else. Anger. Cold. Clarifying anger. I made coffee as the sun rose, my hands steadier now. I sat at the kitchen table where Robert and I had eaten thousands of breakfasts together, and I forced myself to think clearly. What did I actually have? What were my resources? What had I already done to protect myself? And then I remembered. 6 months ago, I'd had coffee with my neighbor, Helen Chen. Helen was a retired attorney, sharp as a tack at 75. We'd been discussing estate planning, and she'd mentioned something that caught my attention. "Margaret," she'd said, "have you considered putting your house in a trust? It protects your assets, gives you control during your lifetime, and makes things much simpler when you pass." At the time, I hadn't been thinking about Sarah's motives. I'd simply thought it was practical advice. Helen had recommended her former colleague, a trust attorney named David Wu. I'd made an appointment, somewhat nervously, not entirely sure what I was doing. David had been patient and thorough. "A revocable living trust," he'd explained, "means you transfer ownership of your house from your name to the trust. But you remain the trustee. You have complete control. You can live here, sell it, modify the trust, whatever you want. The benefit is that when you pass, the property transfers according to your wishes without going through probate, and while you're alive, it provides certain protections." "What kind of protections?" I'd asked. "Well, for one thing, since you don't technically own the house anymore, the trust does, it's much harder for anyone to force a sale or make claims against it. Of course, as trustee, you still make all the decisions." Something in my gut had told me to proceed. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was Robert watching over me. I'd signed the papers 3 months ago. The house on Maple Street was now held in the Margaret Eleanor Thompson Revocable Living Trust. I was the trustee. And upon my death, the property would pass to, well, I'd made some very specific decisions about that. Sarah had no idea. I stood up from the kitchen table, walked to my home office, and pulled out the file drawer where I kept important documents. There it was. The thick folder containing the trust documents, the deed showing the transfer, all of it properly recorded with the county. A plan began forming in my mind. Sarah and Mark thought they were dealing with a confused, helpless old woman. They thought they could bully me into submission, sell my house out from under me, and pack me off to some facility while they gallivanted around Europe on my money. They were wrong. But I wouldn't reveal my hand yet. No, I needed to be strategic. I needed to understand exactly what they were planning, gather evidence of their intentions, and document everything. I needed to protect myself not just legally, but emotionally and socially. Because when this came to light, and it would, I wanted everyone to see the truth. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Helen Chen's number. She answered on the second ring. "Helen," I said, my voice steady now. "I need your help. And I need David Wu's number. Something's happened and I need to know exactly what my rights are. Margaret? What's wrong? You sound upset." I took a deep breath. My daughter just told me she's selling my house and putting me in a nursing home. She doesn't know about the trust yet, and I need to be prepared when she finds out. There was a pause. Then Helen's voice came back, sharp and focused. "Don't say another word over the phone. Come to my house in 20 minutes and bring your trust documents. We're going to make sure you're protected." I hung up, gathered my files, and grabbed my purse. As I locked my front door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt since Robert died. I felt powerful. Helen's kitchen smelled like jasmine tea and determination. She'd already called David Wu by the time I arrived, and he agreed to meet us within the hour. While we waited, Helen made me sit down and tell her everything. Every word Sarah had said, every cold look, every detail of their threats. "That's elder abuse," Helen said flatly. "Financial exploitation? Possibly even attempted fraud if they try to forge documents or manipulate you into signing anything." My stomach churned. "She's my daughter, Helen." "And that makes it worse, not better." Helen's eyes were fierce behind her glasses. "Margaret, you need to face facts. Sarah and Mark are treating you like an obstacle, not a person, not a mother." David Wu arrived at 11. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair, and a calm demeanor that reminded me of Robert. He listened without interrupting as I explained the situation, then asked to see my trust documents. He reviewed them carefully, nodding occasionally. Finally, he looked up. "Margaret, you're in an excellent position legally. As I explained when we set this up, you're the trustee of this trust. The house belongs to the trust, not to you personally. Sarah has absolutely no legal authority to sell it. Even if she were to somehow get power of attorney over you, which she doesn't have, she still couldn't touch the trust property without your explicit consent as trustee." "So what happens when she tries?" I asked. "If she contacts a real estate agent and attempts to list the property, the agent will do a title search. They'll discover the house isn't in your individual name, it's in the trust. They'll need documentation from the trustee authorizing the sale. You, as trustee, simply refuse. Without your signature, the sale cannot proceed." A weight lifted from my chest. "She can't force me out?" "No. And if she tries to physically remove you or harass you, that's a separate matter. Potentially criminal harassment or elder abuse. You could get a restraining order if necessary." Helen leaned forward. "What should Margaret do now?" David considered. "Document everything. Keep records of all communications with Sarah and Mark. If they threaten you, record it if possible. Washington is a two-party consent state for recording, but keep detailed written notes of conversations, dates, times. Don't engage in arguments. Stay calm. And most importantly, don't sign anything they give you. I left Helen's house 2 hours later feeling armed with knowledge, but I also felt something else, a deep, aching sadness. I was preparing for war with my own daughter. The next day, Sarah called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, her tone artificially sweet. "I know it was a lot to process. Why don't Mark and I come over tomorrow? We can go through your things together, make it easier for you." "I'm not ready to pack yet, Sarah," I said carefully. A pause. "Mom, we have a timeline. The movers are scheduled. We need to get the house ready for listing." "I haven't agreed to any of this." Her voice hardened. "Mom, we've already explained this. You don't really have a choice. This is what's best for everyone." "Everyone, or just you and Mark?" "What's that supposed to mean?" Now there was anger creeping in. "It means I'm not packing, Sarah. I'm not leaving my house." She hung up without another word. That evening, Mark called. His approach was different, patronizing, almost therapeutic in tone. "Margaret, Sarah's very upset. She's only trying to help you. We both are. You know you can't maintain that big house forever. Let us help you transition to something more manageable." "The house is fine, Mark. I'm fine." "Are you, though? Because from where we're standing, you seem confused, maybe even a little paranoid." His voice dropped, became more intimate. "Have you been feeling forgetful? Anxious? These can be signs of cognitive decline, Margaret. Nothing to be ashamed of. But it does mean you need help making important decisions." My blood ran cold. He was building a narrative, trying to paint me as mentally incompetent. "I'm perfectly clear-headed, Mark, and I'm telling you clearly, I'm not selling my house." "We'll see about that," he said, and hung up. I sat there, shaking. This was worse than I thought. They weren't just greedy, they were calculating. They were already constructing a story where I was the confused elderly woman who didn't know what was best for her. The next afternoon, I was in my garden when I heard voices from Sarah's old bedroom window above. I'd given her a key years ago for emergencies. Apparently, she'd let herself in. I moved quietly to the side of the house, standing beneath the open window. "Doesn't matter what she wants." Sarah's voice drifted down. "She's being ridiculous. This house is worth at least $800,000. We could clear $300 after putting her in that facility. That's more than enough for the Europe trip and then some. But if she won't sign," Mark began. "Then we find another way. Dr. Morrison has known her for years. I'll talk to him, express concerns about her mental state. We can get a competency evaluation, maybe pursue guardianship. Once we have that, we can make decisions for her." "That takes months, Sarah. We need the money now. I've already booked the flights." "You what?" Sarah's voice rose. "Mark, we agreed to wait until—" "The opportunity in Milan won't wait. My contact said June or never. So we make this happen quickly, or we take out a loan against the future sale." My hands clenched. There it was. Not just greed, but fraud. They were plotting to have me declared incompetent, to seize control of my assets, to institutionalize me against my will. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened the voice memo app. I'd missed the first part of their conversation, but I started recording now. "Can't just force her out," Mark was saying. "We need to be smart. Caring, the concerned daughter and son-in-law helping poor, confused Margaret. That's the narrative." "Fine," Sarah snapped. "But we're doing this my way. I'll schedule a doctor's appointment for her next week. I'll tell Dr. Morrison I'm worried about her behavior. Get it on record." I had heard enough. I had my proof. I walked around to my front door, opened it loudly, and called up the stairs. Sarah? Mark? Is someone here? Footsteps thundered above, then Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, her face flushed. Mom, we used the emergency key. We wanted to start helping you sort through things. I looked at her. Really looked at her. When had my daughter become this stranger? Get out of my house, I said quietly. Mom, don't be… Get out, now, and leave the key on the kitchen counter. They left, Mark's face red with anger, Sarah's eyes shocked. But they left. And I had my recording. The point of no return had passed. The morning after I kicked them out, I called David Wu. I played him the recording I'd made. He listened in silence, his expression growing darker. Margaret, this is serious. They're discussing obtaining guardianship under false pretenses. That's not just unethical, it could be illegal. With your permission, I'd like to take several immediate steps. Whatever you think is necessary, I said. Within 2 days, David had done 3 things. First, he drafted and filed a declaration of competency with the county court, a legal document stating that I was of sound mind and capable of managing my affairs, signed by both me and Dr. Morrison, who I'd visited privately to confirm my mental acuity. Second, he prepared a formal cease and desist letter to Sarah and Mark, warning them that any attempt to sell my property, access my home without permission, or pursue fraudulent guardianship would result in legal action. Third, he arranged for me to execute a durable power of attorney naming Helen Chen as my agent if I ever did become incapacitated, cutting Sarah out entirely. This creates a paper trail, David explained. If they try to claim you're incompetent, we have recent medical and legal documentation proving otherwise. If they attempt to access your property, we have grounds for trespassing, charges, and if they pursue guardianship, the court will see that you've already made rational, appropriate arrangements. I signed everything. Each signature felt like an act of defiance, of reclaiming my power. The cease and desist letter was delivered on a Thursday. Sarah called that evening, and this time, she wasn't pretending to be sweet. What the hell is this, Mom? A lawyer? You got a lawyer. Yes, Sarah, I did. How could you do this to us? We're your family. We're trying to help you, and you treat us like criminals? You broke into my house. You planned to have me declared incompetent. You're trying to steal my home to fund a vacation. My voice was steady, cold. Those are the actions of criminals, Sarah. That's insane! I have a recording, Sarah. I heard every word you and Mark said. Silence. Then quietly. You recorded us? You were in my house without permission, planning to commit fraud. Yes, I recorded you. She hung up. Saturday afternoon, they showed up at my door. Both of them. Mark was carrying a briefcase, and Sarah's face was set in hard lines. I opened the door but left the security chain on. We need to talk, Mark said. Face to face. Let us in. No, we can talk like this. Mom, please, Sarah's voice cracked. Please. We can work this out. We're family. Then act like it, I said. Mark stepped closer, his salesman charm gone. Margaret, you're making a huge mistake. You think some lawyer and some paperwork protects you? You're an elderly woman living alone. Anything could happen. A fall, a fire. Someone could say you wandered into traffic. Who would question it? My blood turned to ice. Was he threatening me? Are you threatening me, Mark? I'm stating facts. His smile was terrifying. Elderly people have accidents, and when they do, the family has to make hard decisions. Without you around to object, Sarah inherits everything anyway. So maybe you should think about whether fighting us is really worth it. Sarah touched his arm. Mark, don't. But I'd heard enough. Get off my property, now, or I'm calling the police. You won't. Mark began. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Mark's face went pale. Sarah grabbed his arm and pulled him back toward their car. "This isn't over!" Sarah shouted as they got in. "You're going to regret this!" They drove away, tires screeching. I closed the door, slid down to the floor, and shook. The operator was asking questions, but I could barely speak. Finally, I managed to tell her it was a domestic dispute, that they'd left, that I was safe for now. She asked if I wanted to file a report. I said yes. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them the cease and desist letter, explained the situation, played them the threatening conversation I'd just recorded on my phone. They took notes, took copies of everything, and filed an incident report. One officer, a woman in her 40s, put her hand on my shoulder. "Ma'am, I want you to get a restraining order. Monday morning. What your son-in-law just did, that's criminal intimidation. You have grounds." After they left, I called Helen. She came over immediately, stayed with me that night. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. The next day was Sunday. Helen made me breakfast, sat with me, helped me process what had happened. "You need to rest," she said gently. "You've been in crisis mode for days. Your lawyer has this handled. The police have a report on file. You have documentation. Take a few days. Breathe. Take care of yourself." She was right. I was exhausted, emotionally, physically, spiritually drained. I spent the next 3 days barely leaving my house. I read books. I sat in my garden. I let Helen bring me meals. I didn't answer the phone except when it was David or Helen. I needed to remember who I was before all this. I needed to remember that I was strong, that I had survived worse. Robert's death. My own cancer scare 10 years ago. Raising Sarah as a single mother for 3 years when Robert was deployed overseas. I had survived. And I would survive this. By Wednesday, I felt clearer, calmer, ready for whatever came next. And something was definitely coming next. I could feel it. On Thursday morning, Sarah sent me a text message. Not a call, a text, as if distance made it easier. "Mom, I'm sorry. I love you. Can we please talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me, the mother part, the part that had held her as a baby, that had kissed her scraped knees and helped her through her first heartbreak, that part wanted to respond, wanted to believe she meant it. But I'd learned better. I didn't reply. An hour later, another text. "I know Mark scared you. He didn't mean it. He's stressed about work. Please, Mom, I can't lose you." Still, I said nothing. That afternoon, flowers arrived. 24 roses with a card in Sarah's handwriting. "I'm so sorry for everything. I just want my mom back. Love, Sarah." I put them in a vase, but I felt nothing. They were beautiful and meaningless. Friday, she tried a different approach. She sent an email. Long, rambling, full of childhood memories. "Remember when I taught you to ride a bike? Remember the tea parties we had? Remember how you stayed up all night with me when I had the flu? You were always there for me, Mom. I need you now. I made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix them. Can't we start over?" I read it once. Then I saved it to a folder David had told me to create, labeled Documentation. Evidence. Saturday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Sarah, alone this time, no Mark. She was holding a photo album, the old one with pictures from her childhood. Tears streaked her face. I opened the door but kept the security chain on. "What do you want, Sarah?" "Just to talk, please. 5 minutes?" She held up the photo album. "I brought this. I thought maybe looking at who we used to be might help." "Who we used to be doesn't change what you've done." "Mom, I know I messed up. But I'm your daughter. Don't I get a second chance?" Something in her voice almost got to me. Almost. But then I remembered the coldness in her eyes when she'd told me I was going to a nursing home. I remembered her plotting with Mark to have me declared incompetent. I remembered Mark's threats. Sarah, if you're truly sorry, you'll respect my boundaries and leave me alone. What if I promise? What if Mark and I agree to back off completely? What if we sign something saying we have no claim to your house? Now this was interesting. A compromise. A trap, probably. Why would you do that, I asked. Because I miss my mom. Because I don't want our relationship to end like this. She wiped her eyes. Look, I'll admit it. We were thinking about the money. We got greedy. But that trip doesn't matter. You matter. What if we just hit reset? You keep your house, live your life, and we just go back to how things were before? It was tempting. God, it was tempting to have my daughter back, to not have to fight anymore. But cold logic settled over me. And what happens when you need money next time, Sarah? What happens when Mark's business has trouble? Or you decide you deserve a new car, or you have another opportunity you can't miss? Will you come back with a better plan? Better manipulation? Her face hardened. So that's it? You're just going to cut me off forever? I'm protecting myself. That's not the same thing. Fine. She shoved the photo album under her arm. Keep your house. Live alone, but don't expect me to come running when you actually do need help. You're burning bridges, Mom, and someday you'll regret it. She left. I closed the door and stood there, my heart aching, but my resolve firm. She didn't understand. I wasn't burning bridges. I was building walls. There's a difference. That Sunday, Helen invited me to her church. I'd never been particularly religious, but I needed community. I needed to be around people who weren't trying to take something from me. The congregation was small, mostly elderly, deeply kind. After the service, Helen introduced me to several people. Within an hour, I'd been invited to a book club, a quilting circle, and a weekly coffee group. These were people who had known loss, who had raised children, who understood life's complications. One woman, Dorothy, pulled me aside. Helen told us a bit about your situation. Not details, she added quickly. Just that you're going through a hard time with family. I want you to know you're not alone. Many of us have complicated relationships with our children. You did nothing wrong by protecting yourself. I nearly cried. Over the next week, I threw myself into this new social world. I attended the book club Tuesday night. We discussed a mystery novel, drank wine, laughed. Wednesday, I joined the coffee group at a local cafe. We talked about everything: gardening, politics, grandchildren. No one pressed me about my troubles, but everyone made sure I knew I was welcome. Dorothy invited me to lunch on Thursday. Over soup and sandwiches, she told me her story. Her son had tried to manipulate her into co-signing a business loan 5 years ago. When she refused, he'd cut off contact with her grandchildren. It nearly killed me, she said quietly, but I stood firm. 2 years later, he came back, apologized. We have a relationship now, but it's different. Boundaried. And you know what? It's healthier. Do you think Sarah will come back? I asked. Dorothy considered. Maybe, maybe not. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself. You've earned the right to peace, Margaret. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark had gone quiet. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. David assured me that was probably strategic. They were regrouping, maybe consulting their own lawyer. Let them, he said. They have no legal ground to stand on. You've done everything right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done. They were watching, waiting, planning, and I needed to be ready. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of me building a life separate from Sarah and Mark. I'd almost started to believe they'd given up. Then, on a Saturday morning in early May, they appeared at my door again. This time, Sarah was carrying a gift bag, and Mark held a bakery box. They were smiling, cautious, apologetic smiles. "Mom," Sarah said when I opened the door, "please, we're not here to fight. We brought peace offerings. Your favorite, lemon scones from Anderson's Bakery." I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to let them in, but part of me was curious. What was their angle this time? "You have 10 minutes, I said, stepping aside. They sat in my living room, the same spots as before. Sarah set out the scones on my coffee table like we were having a normal family visit. Mark's smile was perfectly calibrated, warm but humble, like a man who'd learned his lesson. "Margaret, we owe you an apology," Mark began. "A real one. What we did was inexcusable. We let financial stress cloud our judgment, and we treated you terribly." Sarah nodded, reaching across to touch my hand. I pulled away slightly, and hurt flashed across her face. "Mom, I've been seeing a therapist, working through some things. She helped me realize that I've been treating you like a burden instead of a blessing." "Therapy?" I said neutrally. "Yes, and Mark's been working on his anger management. We both recognize we have issues we need to address." This was a new tactic: vulnerability, self-awareness. The therapy card was clever. It suggested growth, change, genuine remorse. "That's good," I said carefully. "I'm glad you're getting help." "The thing is," Sarah continued, "the therapist asked me to think about what really matters, and what matters is you, our relationship. I don't care about the house anymore, Mom. I really don't. I just want my mother back." Mark leaned forward. "We've canceled the Europe trip. We realized it was a symbol of everything wrong with our priorities. We're refocusing on family, on being better people." I studied them. Sarah's eyes were glassy with tears. Mark's expression was earnest. To anyone else, this might have seemed like a genuine breakthrough, but I saw the calculation behind Sarah's tears. I noticed how Mark's hands were clenched, knuckles white. I recognized the performance. "I appreciate that you're working on yourselves," I said slowly. "But that doesn't change what happened, or the trust that was broken." "We know," Sarah said quickly. "We know it'll take time. We're not asking you to forget. We're just asking for a chance to prove we've changed. Maybe we could have dinner next week. Neutral territory. Just talk." "And," Mark added, "we thought it might help if we formalized some things. Put your mind at ease. We've drafted a document, just a simple agreement where we acknowledge that your house is yours, that we have no claim to it, that we respect your independence. Would you look at it?" He pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the coffee table. Every alarm bell in my head went off. "I'd need my lawyer to review anything before I signed it," I said. Of course," Mark said smoothly. "We'd expect nothing less. Take it to David Wu. We just wanted to show good faith." I picked up the folder but didn't open it. "I'll have him look at it." Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, I know you're being careful. I get it. But at some point, you have to decide. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Do you want to win, or do you want your family back?" There it was, the manipulation wrapped in a false choice. "I want to be safe," I said quietly. "I want to be respected. And I want people in my life who love me for me, not for what I own." Mark's smile froze. Sarah's expression flickered just for a second, and I saw rage beneath the tears. "We do love you," Sarah said, but her voice had an edge now. "We're here, aren't we? Trying, apologizing, bringing you scones. What more do you want?" "I want you to mean it," I said, "not just say it. How are we supposed to prove that if you won't give us a chance?" Mark's voice rose slightly. "We can't go back and undo what happened. We can only move forward. But you're holding the past over our heads like a weapon." "The past was 3 weeks ago, Mark." "Exactly," he exploded, standing up. 3 weeks, and you're acting like we're irredeemable. You got your lawyer, your protective orders, your documentation. You won, Margaret. So what is this? Punishment? Revenge? Mark, calm down, Sarah said, but she didn't sound genuinely concerned. She sounded strategic. No, Mark rounded on me. I'm tired of walking on eggshells. We came here in good faith. We apologized. We offered solutions. And she's sitting there like some kind of judge and jury deciding whether we're worthy of forgiveness. I stood up, my own anger rising. You threatened me. You planned to have me declared incompetent and steal my home. And now you expect me to just forget it because you bought scones and hired a therapist? It wasn't like that, Sarah shouted, standing too. You're twisting everything. We were trying to help you. By taking my house? By putting me in a facility against my will? You're being dramatic. Sarah's face was flushed now, the mask fully slipped. We never said against your will. We just wanted you somewhere safe, somewhere appropriate for someone your age. I'm 72, not 92, and this is my home. It's a house, Mom. Just a house. Why are you so obsessed with it? Why do you care more about property than about your own daughter? Because my daughter, I said coldly, tried to take it from me. The silence that followed was devastating. Sarah grabbed her purse. Mark snatched the folder back from the table. Fine, Sarah hissed. Keep your precious house. Grow old alone in it. But when you fall down those stairs and lie there for days because you have no one, don't expect us to care. You made your choice. They stormed out. The door slammed. I heard their car peel out of my driveway. I stood there, shaking, my heart pounding. Part of me was frightened. They were so angry, so volatile. What would they do next? But another part of me felt strong, vindicated. I had seen through their act. I hadn't been fooled. I had protected myself. I picked up my phone and called David, told him what happened. He asked me to come to his office Monday with the folder Mark had tried to give me. Even though Mark had taken it back, I'd seen the header, and David wanted to know what they'd been trying to get me to sign. After I hung up, I sat in my living room, in the house I'd fought for, and I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, and anger, channeled correctly, was fuel. They wanted to break me. Instead, they'd forged me into something harder to break. The final confrontation came in a way I didn't expect. 2 weeks after their failed reconciliation attempt, I received a formal letter from an attorney I didn't know, a lawyer representing Sarah and Mark. The letter claimed that they had serious concerns about my mental competency and were filing for emergency guardianship on the grounds that I was a danger to myself. I sat in David Wu's office, the letter between us on his desk, and I felt something crystallize inside me. This was it. Their final play. They're claiming you're incompetent, David said, reading through the attached petition. They've submitted statements saying you've become paranoid, hostile, erratic. They claim you've isolated yourself from family, accused them of fictitious plots, and shown signs of cognitive decline. That's a lie, I said flatly. I know, and we can prove it. But Margaret, this is going to court. They've requested an emergency hearing. It's scheduled for next Thursday. Good, I said. Let's end this. David looked surprised. You're ready for this? I've been ready since the day Sarah told me she was selling my house. That week, David and I prepared. We gathered everything. The recording of Sarah and Mark planning to defraud me, the threatening statements Mark had made, the police report, my recent medical evaluation from Dr. Morrison, character statements from Helen and my new friends at church, bank records showing my competent management of finances, documentation of the trust I'd established months ago. We also did something else. David subpoenaed Sarah and Mark's financial records. What we found was damning. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. Mark's business was failing, hemorrhaging money. They had massive credit card debt, a loan they'd taken against their own house. The Europe trip hadn't been canceled. They'd just rescheduled it, hoping to use my money to fund both the trip and bail out Mark's business. Thursday arrived. The courthouse was cold and formal. Sarah and Mark sat across the aisle with their attorney, a man in an expensive suit who looked supremely confident. Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark stared at me with barely concealed contempt. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Hartwell, called the hearing to order. Sarah's attorney spoke first, painting a picture of a concerned daughter watching her mother deteriorate. He described my paranoid accusations, my refusal of help, my isolation. He made me sound like a tragic figure losing her grip on reality. Then David stood. "Your Honor, may I present evidence?" He began methodically. First, Dr. Morrison's recent evaluation, which showed I was cognitively sound, scoring well above average for my age group on all assessments. Then the trust documents, which I'd executed months before Sarah's threats, evidence of long-term planning and competence. Then came the recording. David played it for the court. Sarah's voice, clear as day. "We could clear 300 after putting her in that facility. That's more than enough for the Europe trip and then some." Mark's voice. "We need to be smart, caring. The concerned daughter and son-in-law helping poor, confused Margaret. That's the narrative." The courtroom went silent. Sarah's face drained of color. Mark's attorney closed his eyes. "Your Honor," David continued, "this petition isn't about concern for Ms. Thompson's welfare. It's about money. The petitioners attempted to coerce Ms. Thompson into selling her home to fund a vacation. When she refused, they threatened her. When threats failed, they're now attempting to use the legal system to accomplish through guardianship what they couldn't accomplish through intimidation." He presented the financial records next: the debt, the failing business, the rescheduled trip to Europe. "These are not the actions of concerned family members," David said quietly. "These are the actions of individuals engaged in attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person." Judge Hartwell's expression was ice. She turned to Sarah and Mark. "Would the petitioners like to explain this recording?" Sarah's attorney tried to speak, but Judge Hartwell cut him off. "Not you, counselor. I want to hear from your clients directly. Ms. Peterson, this is your voice on this recording?" Sarah stood shakily. "Your Honor, we were just talking. We were frustrated. Mom was being difficult." "Difficult?" Judge Hartwell's voice could have cut glass. "Your mother refused to let you sell her house without her consent, and that made her difficult?" "We thought it was best for her." "What you thought was best was funded vacation and a business bailout." The judge looked at Mark. "And you, Mr. Peterson, you told Mrs. Thompson that elderly people have accidents and suggested consequences if she didn't cooperate. That's on the police report filed after your visit to her home. Would you like to explain that?" Mark's face was red. I was upset. You didn't mean to threaten an elderly woman? Or you didn't mean to get caught?" The hearing lasted another 30 minutes, but the outcome was never in doubt. Judge Hartwell denied the petition with prejudice, meaning Sarah and Mark couldn't refile. She then did something I hadn't expected. "I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of possible elder abuse and attempted fraud. I'm also issuing a protective order. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, you are not to contact Mrs. Thompson, approach her home, or make any financial claims against her. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest." She looked at me, and her expression softened slightly. "Ms. Thompson, I'm sorry you had to endure this. You've shown remarkable clarity and strength. I hope you can find peace now." As we left the courtroom, Sarah tried to approach me. "Mom, please!" 2 courthouse security officers stepped between us. "Ma'am, you need to step back. The protective order is now in effect." I looked at my daughter, at the stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt nothing but emptiness where love used to be. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said quietly. I walked out of the courthouse with David and Helen. Behind me, I could hear Sarah crying, Mark arguing with their attorney, but I didn't look back. I had won. Not just the legal battle, but the war for my dignity, my home, my life. And it felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. The week after the court hearing, the consequences began to pile up for Sarah and Mark like dominoes falling in slow motion. And I watched it all unfold with a detachment that might have disturbed me if I'd had any sympathy left. David called me on Monday. "Margaret, the district attorney's office has opened a formal investigation. They want to interview you about the attempted fraud and elder abuse." I gave my statement to a detective on Wednesday. The detective, a man in his 50s, was thorough and genuinely angry on my behalf. "What your daughter and son-in-law did, trying to declare you incompetent for financial gain, that's textbook exploitation. We're going to pursue charges." Within 2 weeks, Sarah and Mark were formally charged with attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and conspiracy to commit fraud. Their attorney contacted David, trying to negotiate. Would I consider asking the DA to drop the charges? David didn't even consult me. "The state is pressing charges," he told them. "This is out of her hands now." Mark's business collapsed completely. His clients had been following the case. Courthouse proceedings were public record. One by one, they dropped him. His business filed for bankruptcy within a month. Sarah lost her real estate license. Her broker fired her after the scandal went public. Who would trust a realtor who tried to steal her own mother's house? Meanwhile, I took steps to ensure my future was ironclad. With David's help, I revised my trust completely. Upon my death, my house would be sold and the proceeds split among 3 charities. Sarah was explicitly excluded with a clause that would make any legal challenge nearly impossible. I created a living will and advanced healthcare directive, naming Helen as my healthcare proxy. Not Sarah. Never Sarah again. I updated my will, leaving Sarah exactly $1, proving this was intentional exclusion, not oversight. The rest would go to my new friends at church and young women I'd mentored. Dr. Morrison helped me set up annual cognitive assessments, creating an ongoing record of my mental competency. If anyone ever questions your capacity, we'll have years of data proving your cognitive health. I even installed security cameras around my property, just in case they violated the protective order. 2 months after the hearing, Sarah and Mark's house went into foreclosure. They moved to a rental apartment above a laundromat, downsized from their suburban dream to a shabby 2-bedroom. One evening, I sat in my garden with Helen, drinking iced tea as the sun set. "Do you ever regret fighting back?" Helen asked gently. I thought about that. Really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I protected myself. I stood up for my right to live my life on my terms. Sarah made her choices. I just made sure I survived them." Helen nodded. "You did more than survive, Margaret. You won, and I had. Completely, utterly, without compromise. My house was mine. My future was mine. My life was mine. And no one would ever take that from me again." 6 months after the court hearing, my life had transformed in ways I never expected. I woke each morning with purpose. My days had structure and meaning. Monday book club, Tuesday volunteering at the women's shelter, Wednesday coffee with Dorothy, Thursday quilting circle, Friday lunch with Helen. Weekends were for my garden, for reading, for trips to museums with my new circle of friends. I had become part of a real community. Not just a resident of a house, but a member of a tribe of strong women who supported each other. We celebrated birthdays, helped with doctor's appointments, brought meals when someone was sick. This was family, chosen family that actually cared. At the women's shelter, I mentored young mothers rebuilding their lives after abuse. One young woman, Maria, told me, "You're proof it's never too late to save yourself. You're 72 and you stood up to your own daughter. If you can do that, I can stand up to my ex-husband." Those words meant more than Sarah's "I love you" ever had. I started taking classes at the community college, creative writing and art history. I discovered I had a knack for writing. My instructor encouraged me to submit a personal essay about resilience to a regional magazine. They published it. People reached out, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and recovery. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. My house became a gathering place. I hosted dinners, holiday parties, afternoon tea. The rooms that once felt empty now rang with laughter. I even started dating. A retired professor named William from my art history class asked me to dinner. We talked for hours about books and travel. He didn't want anything from me except companionship. It was refreshing. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark's downward spiral continued. The criminal charges resulted in plea deals, probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. Sarah lost her real estate license permanently. Mark ended up selling used cars, a humiliating fall from his previous status. Their marriage was imploding. They blamed each other constantly. Mark said it was Sarah's idea. Sarah said Mark pressured her. The mutual recriminations were vicious. They'd moved 3 times in 6 months, each apartment smaller and cheaper. Their current place was in the roughest part of town. Sarah's friends had abandoned her. I ran into her former best friend, Jessica, at the grocery store. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry for what Sarah did. I had no idea she was capable of that. We're not friends anymore. I couldn't respect someone who would do that to their own mother." Dorothy put it best. Sarah chose greed over love. She destroyed her own life. You didn't do that. She did it to herself. That fall, on Robert's 75th birthday, I sat in my garden and talked to him like I sometimes did. "I think you'd be proud of me," I said quietly. I didn't let them break me. The wind rustled through the trees, and I felt Robert there with me. I was 72, living in my house on Maple Street, surrounded by genuine friends, pursuing passions, volunteering, learning, growing. I had never been happier, and Sarah had never been more miserable. There was justice in that.